Hey everyone, so in this video we are going to add the remainder of the obstacles, and we're going to go a little bit quicker because at this point it's really just rinse and repeat. We already looked at how to randomly place this obstacle, so it's pretty similar. We're just going to have to add an additional level of randomization because now we have 3 objects to cycle through. So let's go ahead to our game flow script, and again we're going to be repeating this pattern. So we need a public transform, and again it needs to be public so it's accessible in the inspector. You can just drag and drop the prefab onto it, and this will be small crate obj. And again, the obj is just for a naming convention, so when it pops up in the pre-fill lists, we'll know what it is, that it's a game object. And then private, since we don't need this to be in the inspector, private vector3, and this will be next small crate spawn. And if you find that the naming convention actually impedes you and that it confuses you, then don't use it. Just do something so as that it's easy to tell what you're looking at, because as your application gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you're going to have more and more and more variables. So you're going to want some way to be able to know what they are on site. Okay, so let's go over back to our scene just for a minute, because if I don't do this now, I'll forget. So there's a small crate prefab. And now again, it's just rinse and repeat. We need to set the Z, Y, and X. And what we're going to do in order to prevent from preventing all the tracks from being blocked, this is being instantiated with the first tile. And so we'll just instantiate the second one with the second tile. That way you're guaranteeing that you're not blocking all the lanes. We can go back at some point and look at more complex randomization, but again, it's an iterative process. So this is a simple way to make sure that you're only blocking one lane at a time. So again, we need to do these 3 variables. So now it's going to be next small crate spawn equals next tile spawn. Actually, we're going to put Z on both of these. We said that we don't need to overwrite the X and Y because we're about to overwrite it anyway. So it's not a big deal. If for consistency's sake you want to do the same thing here, that's fine. 6 one way, 1/2 dozen the other, though. So next, next small crate spawn dot Y. And I believe it was slightly higher. I think it was like 0.176. You need an F since it's a decimal. And then next small crate spawn and the X position equals, and that is going to be rand X. But here's the thing. This and this, rand X, has not changed in between these 2 instances. So that means this would always be the same as this. So in other words, you'd be blocking the same lane. So that means we need a new randomization. So we'll copy that and paste. Sorry, I hit delete. There we go. So again, we're just randomizing this yet again so as that this won't necessarily be on the same track. It might still, because it's a 1 out of 3 chance, but at least you're guaranteeing that you're attempting to randomize. And now it should be just a matter of instantiate. And this is the small crate object. So again, 3 arguments. What's being instantiated? The small crate object is being instantiated. Where is it being instantiated? It's being instantiated at the next small crate spawn. So again, by using that naming, it's spelling it out for you. And then we're going to use the small crate's object's own rotation. if I haven't forgotten anything, we should now have the crate spawning on the second tile. Well, the second of the spawn tiles, not the second of the one that's already on the screen. Okay, let's run it. There we go. There we go. Right. The crate does look a little bit floaty, even though it's sitting on top of the rails, but that's the kind of visual tweak you can always work on later. So now you have a more complex pattern, but it's still only cycling between two guarantees. In other words, this is guaranteed to be on 1, this is guaranteed to be on 1. We still have this one, and then the randomization to decide where they're going to be. And now for the double crate. So let's go back to game flow, and it's just rinse and repeat these two again. So public, again, needs to be public so it's accessible in the inspector. Transform, and then this time it's going to be DB for double. So double crate, OBJ, and then private, since it does not need to be accessible in the inspector. And again, it's a vector 3. This time it's going to be next DB crate spawn. Save this and go back to the scene for a minute, because if I don't drag and drop it now, I will forget. So there's the GM object, and we will drag and drop our double crate. Now, what we need to do, we need to create, again, another section like this for the double crate, but we don't want to just randomize, because now, since these two are going to be spawned on the same tile, okay, we don't want to risk having the same X come up again. So even if we used another randomization statement, it could match, because there's only there's a 1 out of 3 chance of it coming up again, because it's only 3 possibilities: -1, 0, and 1. So we don't want to use another randomization. Instead, we want to look at this number and then create a new number based on it. So if this came up as 0, then we'll use 1. If it came up as 1, we'll use -1, that kind of thing. So you don't want to just do another randomization, because you could still wind up being at the same X location. So create a few spaces here. So what we'll do, we'll say if randx is equal to 0, it's got to be a double equal, then, oops, not then, sorry, then is understood, my apologies. Then rand x would be set to 1. Else, if rand x equals say 1, then rand x would be equal to -1. Doesn't matter what you're swapping out to, as long as it's not the same. So in other words, we're just looking to see what that variable is now, and we're just changing it. That's all. We're just doing a guaranteed change. And then else. So we check to see if it was 0. If it's 0, it goes to 1. We said if it's 1, it should be -1. Else. So that just leaves if it's already 1 to begin with. So as long as it's not 1, so we'll make rand x be 0. So again, doesn't matter which one you change it to, as long as you're changing it. We just don't want rand x to remain the same. There might be a little bit cleaner way to do this, but again, this is meant to be introductory. This is to put the functionality in place where you're now starting to make decisions. Before you did randomization and just went with it. Now you make a decision based upon that randomization. You're making a second decision, I should say. And so now we will do, so next double crate spawn dot z equals next tile spawn dot z. Next double crate spawn dot y is equal to, I think it was 0.151. And you could put in an F since it's a decimal. And then next double crate spawn dot x is equal to that new rand x value. And then we just instantiate. So again, what is being instantiated? The double crate object. Where is it being instantiated? Next double crate spawn. And its rotation, we're going to use double crate object's own rotation. And then we'll just put a space there. The spaces are ignored. It's just to make it a little bit, you're just kind of breaking it up into its sections, that's all. It's kind of, it doesn't change it functionally, but visually it makes it easier to understand what you're doing with that section. That way you don't have to put in remark statements, but you can if you want. Okay, so if I haven't forgotten anything, so we have the double crate spawn there, no error messages. Bricks, there we go. There we go. Now they are always, there we go, they split up that time. I was going to say they were showing up on exactly the same ones, but again, there's only 3 choices for them to appear on. So now you've got some complexity there. And doesn't look like it would ever be an impossible situation. There's a few that are a little bit questionable, but there's a lot of ways to handle that. You can always make the track run just slightly slower, that kind of thing. Like right here, they'd have to run over. So this is just something that you would do with testing. But then again, a lot of these are singles, so you can just jump over them. So even if you can't get over there, you could jump over that. But again, that's part of the reason why you do your testing, to make sure you don't get into impossible situations. And like I said about additional level of complexity, what you could do is maybe you don't do a double spawn every time. But again, you can build on that now. Now that you've looked at the decision making, you can build on that. So let's go ahead and add the last one. So let's go back to the scene. We take our cart, and I think we're going to have to make one change. I was going to drop it in the scene, but we don't need to do that. We can just open prefab, and it basically opens it into its own workspace. I believe the rigid body was giving me a hard time with the mesh collider. I was getting an error message, so let's just remove the mesh collider, add physics box collider. That's fine, it's lined up nice along the top. Okay, and then you can just back out of that. Now what we'll do, we will take that cart and we're going to add a script to it because we have not done that yet. So right click, create C#, and we'll call this cart move. Just make sure you keep the naming separate. And we'll go to our cart We can go open the prefab, and we can drop on that script cart move. And we will, sorry, didn't mean to double click on that, meant to double click on the script. So again, you can get rid of the remark statements. And at the moment, all we want to do, we want to say get component. So in the start section, because you want this to happen as soon as it's instantiated, because start happens once. It happens when the object is instantiated. So get component, rigid body, and we will do dot velocity equals new vector 3, and it's not moving along the x, it's not moving along the y, it's moving along z, and it's moving towards the screen, so it should be moving in, I believe, a negative direction, say -1. Oops, don't want to put the semicolon there. And for the moment, what we'll do, we'll make the cart be a trigger just for the moment. That way it's not hitting the tracks. Okay. Let's just test that cart. Let's put it in the scene. And I just want to make sure that it's actually moving. Yes, you can definitely see it is moving on its own. Okay. So we go back to the script. This one's all set because all this is doing is giving it motion. We go back to game flow, and again, rinse and repeat. Public. Transform. And this will be cart obj. And this will be private vector 3 cart. Actually, next cart spawn. Now, just similarly, we have to set the coordinates, but then we have to set a randomization to decide, do we want this to show up, or do we want the cart to show up? Or you could do it here either way. So again, that's why I wanted to save this for its own video, because now you have to start making decisions as to where you want these objects to appear. Rather than just showing them on the next tile, you're now choosing which object is showing up on that tile. So there's lots of ways you can do this. You can do another randomization. So let's do that. So for the moment, let's put this in for the cart, and then we'll come back and modify it to decide if it's going to be the cart or the double crate that's going to show up. So next cart spawn dot z equals next tile spawn dot z next cart spawn dot y equals, let's check that because I don't remember. So 0.119. And then next cart spawn dot x equals, we're going to use rand x, but like I said, we're going to put in an if statement here, so it's okay that we're not modifying it again. Let's save that. Actually, I'll also do the instantiate cart object. So what is being instantiated, where it's being instantiated, and its rotation. Just going to go back to the scene for a second. I don't remember if okay, I did not put the cart there yet. Okay. And now it's just a matter of deciding how you want to alternate between these. So what you could do is you could just do another random number. So we'll do private int rand choice. And I'll default to 0. What we do here, so we've spawned the tile, the first object on the first tile. We spawned the second tile, the first object on that tile. And now we want to spawn a second object on that tile. And so now we'll make a decision here. So if, actually we got to do a randomization, sorry. So that was random choice equals random dot range, and we'll just do 0, 2. So that gives us 0 or 1 because the 2 is not inclusive. And then we just wrap this whole thing in an if statement. If rand choice equals 0 equals, sorry. Oops, still didn't do the equals. So squiggly bracket here, just 1. Squiggly bracket there to close. Squiggly bracket there, and squiggly bracket there. Now, even this isn't perfect because this random x is not checked against the second tile. So it is possible that your cart could spawn in such a way that it could collide. It won't be on top of it because it's one tile away, but you could indeed have these lined up. So that's what I'm saying. The more complex, the more rules you'll put in place, but there's a simple way to get around that. So, but let's just make sure this is working now. And then I think we'll wrap up the video. So ultimately, we created a new random variable. If choice is 0, you spawn the double crate. If choice is anything other than 0, which would be 1, then you spawn the cart. I think that's all we need. So there is the bricks. There we go. See what I'm saying about how it can go through those? So we are indeed spawning the cart. It's just it's spawning way out there. So that's one thing to keep in mind is the fact that it is way out there. So let's do that for now. Let's go into this, and we'll set this to like 0.2f. Got rid of the negative. There we go. So let's do one last thing. Let's delete the furthest one out because we moved the camera. and then we will go to game flow, and we'll change this by 1. It needs to be 1 closer. Okay. So what's going to happen is everything is spawning closer to the camera, so this isn't driving around for nearly as long. So that in itself will clear up the issue. So if you speed this up again, you should be fine. It's not perfect, but I think we'll end there because now it's starting to get at the point where you really have to do minute control, and I don't want to go that deep yet. We still have to add the playable character, and I still want to add other things like creating like wedges that they can run up along, like in Subway Surfer, there's like boards you can run up on top of trains. So I want to do things like that where there'll be obstacles that you can run up on top of. But you can see with just a few tweaks. So in short, what was happening is the cart was spawning so far out in the distance that it was having plenty of time to run into the obstacles in front of it. By reducing how far out it was spawning much closer. It's not moving for as long as a time, so it doesn't need as much space. So that alone, just changing this, having it not spawn as far out, basically fixed that problem. So like I said, you probably could speed it up, but we'll tweak it. One of the things that you can always do, we can make the cart, right now it's a trigger, we can change it back to a solid collider. That way, if it hits the bricks, it'll just like stop there. If it hits the crates, it'll just stop there, that kind of thing. Okay, so we got a lot done in this video. So we didn't add the playable character yet, but now you have all the obstacles, at least that we've planned up to this point. Like I said, I do want to add like slopes that you can run up. And now you have a movable cart. So I think that should do it for this video, and I hope you found this useful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.